I always made my own drinks, a chamomile coffee at dawn, then one of pruning the hot chocolate, only when the pain behind my knees refused to give in. It was my way of maintaining control, a small ritual in a life that was slowly beginning to feel like a borrowed space. When Emily remarried and asked if I wanted to move into the little house from the patio, I said yes, not because I needed help, but because her voice sounded like she needed to offer it to me. I was still lucid enough to live alone, but missed hearing a voice that knew my name without having to remind them. And at that moment, James seemed harmless, neat, attentive, always ready to carry a heavy box or fix a shelf that was wobbling. But lately, I had begun to notice things. My morning pills were sometimes already on the tray without me asking for them. Soups appeared out of nowhere. "Extra protein," he said with that toothy smile. I learned to smile back while secretly throwing everything into the garbage disposal. I told myself I was exaggerating. Old ladies and their suspicions, right? But this morning was different. It was my door, just as I was finishing a crossword puzzle. "I thought it would be useful for you, something warm," he said, holding a cup with both hands as if it were something sacred. The steam rose in lazy spirals. "Thank you," I replied carefully but courteously. "It's my mom's recipe. Cinnamon, a hint of chili, and vanilla." I nodded, wrapping my fingers around the cup. It was hot. He smiled a second longer before leaving. I brought the cup to my nose. At first, only chocolate, then something fainter but clear, like burnt metal mixed with cough syrup. I blinked uncertainly. I smelled it again. There it was. The heat had released it, letting it float to the surface. Footsteps were heard. Margaret, his mother, entered from the courtyard, using one of my old scarves. "Don't let it cool down," she said, looking at the cup. Her tone was dry, almost rehearsed. I nodded, trying to smile again. My pulse was hitting my ribs. Now there were two cups on the counter, hers and mine, identical, except for a small scratch on the handle of one. I moved slowly, listening. James was still in the other room, humming. Margaret had turned back toward the sliding door. I put my cup next to hers, a slight clinking. Then, with firm fingers, I took the cup with the scratch, hers, and carried it upstairs. I placed the cup on the sill, taking care not to spill a single drop. From there, I could see the edge of the garden and the gravel road where James had parked his now empty car. He must have taken Emily to the dentist. They would return at noon, which gave me time to think, to breathe. I sat in the rocking chair by the window, the one Michael used for his naps after lunch. The aroma of chocolate floated in the sweet air on the surface, but with that same bitter thread woven underneath. I didn't need to taste it. My instinct had already spoken. Something about the smell triggered a memory. Weeks ago, I found a jar in the pantry, hidden behind the condiments. White label, a long name I didn't recognize. I looked it up on the internet, and the word sedative appeared first. I didn't say anything then. I wanted to believe it wasn't what I feared. Now I wasn't so sure. The floor creaked downstairs. Margaret again. Her steps were uneven, heavier on the right side. I approached the door, my heart firm but alert. "All good?" she shouted from below. "Everything's perfect," I responded, louder than usual. I heard her settling in the kitchen. A chair slid, then silence. I imagined her slowly drinking, shoulders tense with anticipation. I didn't know. That was the worst part. I didn't know what had just passed by. I looked at the striped handle of the cup, a small detail, easy to overlook, but I noticed it the first time she came, as James always gave her that cup. Maybe it was his favorite, maybe it just didn't matter. I got up, opened the window, and let the fresh air in. I needed to clear my mind, but the smell remained stuck to me, as if it had gotten into my skin. Downstairs, the main door opened and closed. James's voice floated upstairs. "I'll be back in a moment, Mom." "It's okay, little one," Margaret replied. Her voice sounded lighter than before, even happy. I saw her silhouette pass by through the kitchen window, with the cup in her hand. I didn't go downstairs. I just waited. I sat in silence. I let the minutes drag on. At 10:34 sharp, I heard the first sound, the sudden crash of porcelain hitting the floor. The sound of the cup breaking made me shudder, but I didn't move, not immediately. I stood very still, listening. Downstairs, the kitchen filled with the sound of a chair scraping violently against the ground, a gasp, and then a low, guttural, strange moan. I got up, not fast, not slow. My legs felt firm, although my chest fluttered. I opened the door of the room and went down the stairs step by step. My hand brushed the handrail, more for rhythm than for support. Upon reaching the last step, I saw her. Margaret was on the floor, leaning against the counter, one hand on her abdomen, the other shaking erratically at her side. Her eyes were open, her mouth out of focus, opening and closing as if searching for the right word and unable to remember how to form it. The remains of the cup were scattered around her, brown liquids seeping into the joints, the steam still rising. I didn't run towards her. I didn't shout. I walked in slowly, my shoes silent on the tile. She turned her head towards me, lips loose. She tried to say something, but the word collapsed under its own weight. My fingers itched to reach for the phone, to call someone, anyone, but I hesitated. My heart wasn't beating fast. That was what struck me the most. I felt clear, not cruel, not triumphant, just awake. Then the door opened again. James, whistling, entered the kitchen with a plastic bag from the supermarket in one hand and keys in the other. When he saw her on the ground, the smile fell from his face like a mask. "Mom." He dropped the bag. The oranges rolled under the table. "What happened?" he cried, kneeling next to her. "Mom." She didn't respond. He turned his head toward me. "What did you do?" I looked into his eyes. "I didn't take what you gave me." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "What are you talking about?" he said, but his voice was softer now. I stepped carefully over the pieces of the broken cup. I took the rag from the counter and crouched next to the spill, not to help, just to clean. Slowly, in silence. Behind me, his breathing cut off. He took out his phone and started to dial. Emily answered. I heard her voice faintly through the loudspeaker. James asked, "What's wrong?" And that was when he said it, just before the call cut off. "Something's wrong with Mom. She took the chocolate. No, Sarah." Emily arrived 13 minutes later, breathless, with her coat half on, keys still in hand. She didn't even lock the car door. I saw her from the hallway as she knelt beside Margaret, brushing her hair away from her forehead, her voice a whisper of panic. James hovered nearby, uselessly. He looked at me as if I had to explain something, fix something. I didn't. I leaned against the doorframe with my arms crossed, watching as he avoided my eyes completely. The paramedics arrived in a whirlwind of blue and red lights, reflecting in the white cabinets on the kitchen floor, now stained with chocolate and chaos. They asked questions. Emily answered most of them. James was pacing. I didn't say anything. My voice wouldn't have changed anything then. Margaret was still breathing, barely. Her pulse was weak, her skin waxy. They strapped her to a stretcher, a paramedic muttering something about stabilizing vital signs, time of transfer. Another paramedic, a young woman with a clipboard, turned to James. Did she ingest something unusual this morning? She had chocolate, James said quickly. I prepared it for everyone. It's a family recipe. The paramedic wrote it down, nodded. We'll do a toxicology analysis upon arrival. They took Margaret out. Emily followed, but stopped next to me. What happened? She took my cup, I said simply. Emily blinked. Do you think she was poisoned? I didn't answer. There was no need. The main door closed behind them, and the house emptied into a strange, dense silence. No murmurs of voices, no movement, only the slight hum of the refrigerator and the roll of one of the oranges finally stopping. James stayed where he was by the sink, looking out the window as if the answers were in the trees. I went back to the dining room, pulled out a chair, and sat down slowly. He didn't speak until I reached for the napkin next to my plate. I don't know what you think you're doing, he said with a tense voice, but this is not what it seems. I unfolded the napkin and put it on my lap. Then you have nothing to worry about. I kept my eyes on him until he looked away. I stayed at the table long after James withdrew to his office. I listened to the drawers opening and closing, his voice low on the phone. He didn't shout. I wasn't panicking, just calculating. I opened my notebook. 6 weeks ago, I started to write things down. At first, just to keep track of Emily's new work schedule, my prescriptions, watering days for the orchids. But then the notes changed. James started bringing me drinks regularly, always without me asking for them: lemon tonic, bone broth, chocolate. Each time, I recorded the date, what I smelled, what I drank or didn't drink. I flipped back a few pages. There it was. 2 Saturdays ago, he brought me an herbal tea for my nerves. The tea was cloudy and the cup was hot, although I didn't see the kettle on. I didn't touch it. He asked about it twice afterward. I also had pictures of the jar I found behind the rice can. It's labeled detached but legible, a prescription not in anyone's name that I recognized. I photographed it quickly before he returned to the kitchen and had receipts. Last week, I found a pharmacy bag in the guest bathroom trash can, wrinkled at the bottom, a printed invoice, over-the-counter sleeping pills, a laxative tablet for dizziness, all in the same purchase. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a trail. And now, Margaret was in a hospital bed. That's why I got up and went to my room. I closed the door and took a deep breath. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and took out the padded envelope I had prepared the night before. Inside were copies of everything: notes, photos, receipts. I didn't know exactly what James's plan was: to confuse me, make me look unstable, slowly dependent on him, or simply make me disappear. But I did know I wasn't wrong. That metallic smell wasn't in my imagination, and Margaret had drunk what was meant for me. The main door opened softly downstairs. I heard Emily's voice again, tired, worn out. Then her footsteps approached, determined, and stopped just outside my door. She knocked once. "Mom, can we talk?" I closed the envelope, slipped it under a stack of books, and opened the door. Emily entered without waiting. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from that tiredness that lives behind the eyes and doesn't go away with sleep. She looked around my room as if something had changed since the last time she was there. "She's stable," she said. "They're doing more tests." I nodded. "I'm glad." She sat on the edge of the chair by the window, hands crossed as if she didn't know what to do with them. "James says you accused him." I didn't respond. I let her digest that for a moment. "He said you swapped the cups, that you were trying to prove something." I sat down in the chair in front of her. "He also told you he offered me that chocolate," I said. She nodded. "Yes, and he mentioned it smelled strange. Metallic, medicinal." She hesitated. "He said it was the chili." I raised my eyebrows. "Have you ever put chili in anything else he's prepared?" "No," she replied. "I've been keeping a log," I said in a low voice, "of what he brings me, of what's changed since he moved in." Emily looked at me. Then she really looked at me. "Do you think he's trying to hurt you?" "I think," I said, "he wanted to get me out of the way. Maybe not at once, maybe little by little, clouding my mind, making me seem forgetful, difficult, someone to gently get out of the house." Her hands squeezed together. "That's not him." I let her say it. I didn't contradict her, not yet. "But something happened to Margaret," I continued, my voice softening. "And it wasn't by chance. She'd never had seizures before. She hadn't eaten anything else that morning, just the chocolate." I nodded again. "You don't have to decide anything today, but you do have to start noticing." She looked down at her lap, fingers interlaced. "It's been different lately, cold, reserved. He says it's stress, pressure from work, but I don't know." I got up and went to the shelf. I took out the manila folder and offered it to her. These are copies, I said, of everything I've been saving just in case. She took it slowly, holding it as if it could burn her. Outside, a car door slammed. Tires crunched against the gravel. James was home. Emily put the folder in her bag quickly before the main door opened. I heard James's footsteps, deliberate and too strong on the tile. She straightened up, smoothed her hands on her jeans, and threw me one last uncertain look before leaving my room. Their voices filtered through the walls. His, too happy, hers, fragile. I stayed by the window, watching how the wind moved the branches outside, letting their voices fade into something far away. Eventually, the house crowded again. Closed doors, water running, a pan clanging. I didn't join them for dinner. Instead, I waited until the hallway darkened. Then I went to the kitchen. I moved silently. The tile stained with chocolate had been scrubbed, but a slight discoloration was still visible in the grout. I stood there for a moment, looking at that spot, before I turned around and poured myself a glass of water. That night, I barely slept. I kept the originals of the folder on my nightstand, double-checking they were still there, though I already knew they were. When I slept, it was a light, interrupted sleep, broken by creaks in the hallway and the low hum of the refrigerator. In the morning, the air in the house had changed. I felt it in the way Emily moved quickly, almost formally. James avoided me completely. He left early without saying where he was going. I took the silence as permission. After breakfast, I called the non-emergency police line and asked someone to investigate a possible case of poisoning. I explained what happened in neutral terms, no judgments, just facts. The woman on the phone was polite, professional. She promised someone would get in touch. That afternoon, while I pruned the withered edges of the mint near the back gate, I heard the doorbell. A pause, then voices again. Emily called me from the kitchen door. "Mom," she said, "there's someone here who wants to talk to you." I cleaned my hands on my gardening rag and went inside. A woman was in the entrance with a badge on her belt and a notebook in her hand. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "I'm Detective Guzman." Detective Guzman followed me into the living room. She wasted no time with courtesies. I appreciated it. She sat on the edge of the sofa, pen ready. "I understand there was an incident with your son-in-law's mother, Margaret. Correct?" "Yes," I said. "She collapsed shortly after drinking a chocolate that James prepared." She nodded. "And you think that drink was meant for you?" I looked into her eyes. "Yes." She paused, then said, "Tell me what happened from the beginning." And I did. From the moment James offered me the cup until the swap I made while he and Margaret weren't looking. I told her about the smell, the records I had kept, the jar in the pantry, the receipt in the garbage. I handed her the envelope with the original copies. She flipped through it silently, nodding as she read. Emily stood at the entrance, arms crossed, listening. She hadn't said much since the detective arrived, but I felt something shift in her, as if the ground beneath her feet began to creak. "I haven't touched anything since then," I said, "and I haven't accused him publicly. Not yet." The detective closed her pen with a click. "The toxicology report came back from the hospital this morning," she said. "They found traces of a sedative in Margaret's blood, not a recreational dose, something closer to what you'd use before a medical procedure." Emily gasped, bringing her hand to her mouth. Guzman didn't look away from me. "There will be a formal investigation. I'll interview James. And if you remember anything else, any detail, no matter how small, call me directly." I nodded, my throat dry. She stood up, gathered the documents in the envelope, and handed it back to me. "Thank you for your time, Mrs. Carter." When she left, Emily stayed behind. "Do you think they'll arrest him?" she asked, barely in a whisper. "I think," I said, "the tests will continue." She didn't speak again, just looked at the kitchen as if it were something she no longer recognized. That night, I was washing a single teacup in the sink when James arrived. His eyes met mine, tense, cautious. I knew, and he was on the verge of learning, that it wasn't over. The next morning, the cup had disappeared. It wasn't in the sink. the dishwasher, or anywhere. The striped one, Margaret's, the one I left on my dresser, was gone. I knew I hadn't moved it. I checked every cabinet, even the garbage. Nothing. James was erasing evidence, or trying to. I didn't tell Emily. Not yet. She was already falling apart, every hour bringing a new silence, a new distance between her and him. I didn't want to interfere with the slow, necessary process of seeing someone you love become a stranger. Instead, I went back to my room, opened the bottom drawer, and took out a second envelope James didn't know existed, copies of everything. I put it in my coat pocket. At 2:15 in the afternoon, Detective Guzman called. "We took him in for questioning," she said. "Would you be willing to come and give a formal statement?" "Yes," I said, "of course." When I arrived, the station felt colder than I expected, silent too. Guzman met me in the lobby and escorted me herself. She offered me coffee. I declined. In the interview room, I told everything again, this time for the record. I signed the forms, put my initials on the copies. I answered every question clearly. Near the end, she slipped a photograph on the table. It was of the jar I mentioned, the one in the pantry. "Is this what you saw?" "Yes," I said. She tapped the photo once with her pen. The same compound found in Margaret's blood. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I left the station, the wind had stiffened. I adjusted my scarf, the envelope pressed against my chest like armor. By the time I got home, James had left. Emily was sitting on the porch steps, holding her wedding ring. She didn't look up when I sat next to her. She held the ring as if it were something alien, a puzzle piece that no longer fit anywhere. Her eyes were swollen, the sleeves of her sweater pulled up unevenly as if she'd been tugging at them all morning. "He left it on the dresser," she said in a low voice. "He said nothing, just packed a bag and left. I didn't say I was sorry, not because I didn't feel it, but because sorry didn't have the right shape for what had happened. Some things break so slowly, you don't hear the creaking until they're gone." "He said it made him feel watched," she added, her voice fragile. "That he didn't trust me. And maybe I didn't want to see it until I had no choice." I put my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the patio. Inside, the house felt different, lighter. Not cheerful, not yet, but lighter. I could breathe without that weight pressing on my ribs. Margaret was getting better. The hospital called that morning. She had opened her eyes and asked for water. They expected her to recover. Detective Guzman said James wouldn't be formally charged until the full toxicology report and financial background came in. But I was confident. There was enough. There always is if someone keeps the record. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. We stayed until the wind grew colder. Later, I made tea, a single cup, just mine. I sat by the window and opened a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date, then paused. There was a buzzing in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Not anxiety, not fear, something firmer, something like determination. I took a sip. I was still here. I was still lucid. I was still fighting.